The chandeliers of the Beaumont Hotel were not just lights, they were suns, pouring liquid gold onto the faces of the rich, faces that never seemed to sweat or show fear. I stood near the Grand Terrace, the Midtown Manhattan skyline glittering behind the glass, feeling the vibration of 100 expensive conversations. I, Nora Russo, was in an emerald silk dress that had cost me 2 weeks of careful saving. My hands, however, were shaking. The silk against my palms felt slippery, cold. It was because of him, Ethan Ward, my ex. He was across the ballroom, standing near the string quartet, holding a champagne flute. He was not drinking from it, and he was just looking at me. His stare was a physical thing, a heavy hand pressing down on my shoulders, a reminder that he believed he owned my past. He was the master of gaslighting, the man who could make you apologize for his own cruelty. I should have felt victorious. I had just 3 days ago accepted the position of head of social impact partnerships at Valerius Holdings. It was a job that felt impossible, a lifeline. Valerius Holdings was a giant, an investment and logistics behemoth with a reputation as clean as its steel tower headquarters, and just as many whispers about its foundations, rumors of an Italian-American mafia heritage of old blood and old money, clung to the name like shadows. My new role was to build light, to make their philanthropic arm transparent. Now, all I felt was the chill of Ethan's gaze. I could not breathe. I needed an escape, a shield. I took a step back, my heel hitting the polished marble base of a decorative pillar. Beside me, near the terrace doors, stood a man. He was tall, his back to me, looking out at the city. His suit was impeccable, a simple black tie. He was a wall of stability in a room that suddenly felt like it was tilting. I did not think. I only acted. I moved close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that he would have to hear my whisper. I leaned in, my voice shaking only a little. "Could you dance with me? My ex is watching." The words hung in the air, ridiculous and desperate. A stranger. I had just asked a complete stranger to be my shield. He turned, slowly, and he was taller than I thought, his shoulders broad. His face was not conventionally handsome. It was something more structured. His eyes, dark in the golden light, met mine. There was no surprise in them, no hesitation. He simply looked at me, taking in the emerald dress, the shaking hands, the plea. He did not ask questions. He did not smile. He just extended his right hand, palm up, an invitation. I placed my trembling fingers in his. His grip was firm, his skin warm. At that exact moment, the orchestra shifted. The lively chatter of the quartet faded, replaced by the smooth, confident swell of a foxtrot. It was almost comical timing. He led me onto the dance floor, his hand finding the small of my back, a solid, respectful pressure. We began to move. I am not a great dancer, but he led with such quiet authority that my feet seemed to know where to go. The panic in my chest began to subside, replaced by a new awareness, the scent of him. It was not the heavy cologne that filled the rest of the ballroom. It was clean, like cedar wood and a faint, distant wisp of smoke. His rhythm was the only thing that mattered, his steady steps anchoring my panic. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, Wanchgenki. I let myself focus on that, on the solid line of his jaw, the way he moved. I chanced to look over his shoulder. Ethan was still watching, his handsome face now tightened into a mask of displeasure. And he was not alone. Standing with him, her silver hair coiled in an elegant chignon, was a woman I recognized only from whispers and grainy online photos, Bianca Caruso. They called her the godmother of the art world, the fixer of the A-list, and, in darker circles, the banker for the underworld. She was supposed to be a myth. She was real. She was nodding at something Ethan was saying, her expression placid, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat, a line of connection, cold and bright, flashed between them. And in that instant, I knew my trouble with Ethan was no longer just about the past. It was about my future. He is not worth your attention." The voice of the stranger pulled me back. It was low, a rumble I felt more than heard through the hand on my back. He had not taken his eyes off me. "My name is James," he said. "Just James." His gaze was too calm. He was not a guest caught up in a drama. He was an observer, someone who understood the room's currents. I saw the flash of a camera from the press balcony. Then another. The paparazzi were here, capturing the mingling of new money and old blood. James seemed to notice them. He drew me a fraction closer, his head dipping toward mine. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice soft but absolute. "Do not look at him." I obeyed. I held his gaze, finding an unexpected stillness there. We danced. We did not talk. The song felt like it lasted an hour, a small pocket of safety I had stumbled into. But it had to end. The music softened, the final notes hanging in the air. We slowed to a stop. I started to pull my hand from his shoulder, to break the spell. "Nora, we need to talk." Ethan's voice cut through the air, sharp and possessive. He was standing right at the edge of the dance floor, his face a mask of false concern. My James did not release me. "Ethan, this is not the place," I said, my voice tight. Ethan laughed, a short, ugly sound. He ignored James completely, focusing only on me. "Is it not you always run to the shiniest new thing? Do you not? Do not forget what you left behind. Do not forget Project Nightingale." Ice, pure, solid ice flooding my veins. Project Nightingale was not a project. It was a code name, a file I had worked on at my old agency, a file that had irregularities, a file that had vanished right before I resigned. He was not just threatening me. He was threatening my new career. He was telling me he had a weapon. Before I could find a word, a single breath, James moved. It was not a violent motion. It was a simple, elegant pivot. He turned his body, rotating us both, placing his broad back directly in Ethan's line of sight. He blocked me from view. He shielded me completely. He did not say a word to Ethan. He simply erased him. From behind the wall of his black suit, I heard Ethan swear, a low, vicious sound, but he did not advance. James stood perfectly still, a silent guardian, until he heard Ethan's footsteps recede. Only then did he turn back to me. The song was long over. The floor was clearing. He looked down at me, his dark eyes searching my face. He gently lifted his hand from my back and, in a gesture that felt both ancient and incredibly tender, he lightly touched the back of my hand with his thumb. It was not a caress. It was a commitment, a seal. "Do not let him decide your night," James said, his voice still low, still calm. He then escorted me off the floor, his hand at my elbow, as if we had done this 100 times. He walked me to the arched entrance of the VIP lounge. "You are safe here," he said. He nodded once, a crisp, formal gesture, and then he turned and melted back into the crowd. I stood there for a long moment, the scent of cedarwood lingering. I had to sign the papers. The whole reason I was here was for the Valerius sponsorship. I pushed through the velvet rope, my mind racing. Nightingale, Nightingale, Nightingale. I found the right table, signed the grant agreements for the community literacy program, my signature less steady than I would have liked. As I slipped my phone back into my small clutch, it vibrated. A new message, unknown number. It contained only one sentence. "Do not trust money people wash with prayers." A shiver went down my spine, colder than Ethan's threat. I looked back out at the ballroom, searching for the man who called himself James. He was gone. I did not know then. I could not have known. I had no idea that my steady, quiet dancer, the man who had shielded me without a word, was not named James at all. I did not know that I had just danced with Luca Valerius, the reclusive chief executive officer of my new company, the Billionaire. And, if the darkest whispers were true, the man trying to use transparency and corporate law to scrub the mafia blood from his family's multi-billion-dollar legacy, the man who was, in fact, my new boss. I left the Beaumont through a side entrance. the emerald silk dress feeling like a costume I was desperate to shed. The cold night air hit my face, a welcome shock after the overheated ballroom. I found a taxi, the yellow light of its roof sign cutting through the darkness. As the cab merged into the river of midtown traffic, the text message burned in my mind. Do not trust money. People wash with prayers. And the name from Ethan Nightingale. My worlds were colliding, the polished, golden world of the Beaumont and the world I came from. I grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. My childhood did not smell like cedarwood and smoke. It smelled like oregano, garlic, and the yeasty magic of my mother's pizzeria, Russo's Pizza. It was our life. My earliest memories were of standing on a milk crate, sprinkling mozzarella, my fingers sticky with dough. The pizzeria was a community hub, but it was also a place of unspoken rules. It ran on cash. The register was always full of bills, the tip jar overflowing with quarters and singles. My mother, with her perpetually flowery apron and tired eyes, navigated it all. Uncles would come in, men in sharp suits who did not look like they ate pizza. They would sit in the back booth, drinking espresso. They laughed, their voices warm, but their eyes never smiled. They would pat my head, slip me a $20 bill, and tell me to be good to my mother. I learned to see and not see. I learned to count the cash, stack it, and never ask why some envelopes were thicker on the first of the month. I learned the most important rule of the neighborhood, knowing and not saying. My mother, she was the opposite. She believed in kindness. Kindness is the most durable currency. Nora, she would tell me, wiping her hands on her apron. It is the only thing that appreciates. She gave free slices to kids who were short on change. She listened to the neighborhood gossip. She was a pillar of quiet strength. But I learned, much later than I should have, that her definition of kindness did not mean being a doormat. It did not mean letting people walk over you. That was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. That lesson was named Ethan Ward. I met him not long after I started my first real job. I was ambitious, eager to prove that a girl from a pizzeria could navigate the corporate world. Ethan was handsome, with that easy, preppy charm that seemed to disarm everyone. He spoke in soft, measured tones, like a therapist. When we first started dating, he was my biggest champion. He was protective. He listened to my dreams. He made me feel seen. Then, slowly, the corrosion began. It started with small things. He would question my choices. Are you sure that dress is professional enough? Nora, you want them to take you seriously. When I got emotional about a project, he would sigh. That soft, disappointed sound. You are letting your feelings cloud your judgment. You are too emotional to lead. He would question my memories. I never said that. You are remembering it wrong again. He was a gaslighter, a master of making me feel small, unstable, and ungrateful. He made me believe my kindness, the currency my mother swore by, was my greatest weakness. I knew I had to get out. I poured every bit of energy I had left into my escape plan. I enrolled in a Master of Business Administration program at night. My life became a blur. I would work all day as a junior account executive at a small, struggling agency, my brain numb from spreadsheets. At 5:30 post-meridium, I would run to the R train, scarfing down cup noodles for dinner, the hot, salty broth tasting like desperation. I would sit in class until 10 post-meridium, my head pounding, trying to absorb concepts of finance and strategy that felt a million miles from my life. Then, I would ride the train back to my tiny apartment, sleep for 5 hours, and do it all again. I was not just running from Ethan, I was running towards something. I had this persistent, maybe naive, dream. I wanted to use the mechanisms of corporate America, the brands and the money, to do actual good. I wanted to prove that social impact was not just a branding exercise. I finally broke up with Ethan. It was ugly. He did not yell. He just looked at me with that crushing disappointment and said, "You will regret this, Nora. You will not survive out there without me." For a long time, I was afraid he was right. I finished my degree, but I was still stuck at the same agency. Then, one rainy Tuesday, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simple: Valerius Holdings Inquiry. It felt like a mistake. Valerius Holdings. They did not recruit from agencies like mine. I opened it. They were looking for someone to build a new department, a head of social impact partnerships. The description was everything I'd been writing papers about. They did not just want to write checks. They wanted a system, a transparent, data-driven platform to measure the real-world impact of their community funds. It was a window opening in a room that had been sealed shut. I threw myself into the interviews. I designed a whole framework, what I was already calling the kindness ledger in my head. I was grilled by 6 different executives. I was sharp. I was prepared. I was fueled by 1,000 nights of cup noodles. And I got the job. I walked into this new life, this skyscraper near Bryant Park, feeling like I'd finally made it. I had a support system, my moral compasses. Marisol Vega, my best friend since college. She was a journalist, the kind who did not sleep. She had an investigative podcast that was starting to make some very powerful people very nervous. She lived on coffee and righteous fury. If I ever started to believe my own corporate spin, Marisol would be the first to call me out. And Dion Park, he was in house counsel at Valerius, in the compliance department. We had met during my final interview. He was brilliant, impossibly smart, and so painfully direct it was almost an art form. He saw the world in black and white, law and breach. He was the one who told me, "Your idea is good, but if your data is not auditable, it is just marketing. Do not waste my time with marketing." I liked him immediately. With them, I felt anchored. I was ready. But there was the shadow, the Valerius name. The official story was clean. Decades of logistics, then smart investments in tech, real estate, and global shipping. The unofficial story was darker. Whispers of old family ties, of a heritage that was more Godfather than Fortune 500. And at the center of it, the biggest mystery, Luca Valerius, the chief executive officer. The rumors about him were contradictory. They said he was ruthless. They said he was a recluse. They said he was a cleaner with a conscience, a man using 21st century data and brutal legal strategy to launder a 20th century legacy. They said he was trying to scrub the gray from his family's name. But darkness does not just leave because you turn your back on it. And then there was the other name, the one that surfaced in Marisol's research, the one that was whispered in the art galleries of Chelsea and the foundation galas of Midtown, Bianca Caruso. I had never met her, but seeing her name on lists, in quiet memos, I had this strange, cold feeling, a feeling that she had, in some way, already met me, that she knew the names of people like me long before we knew hers. The taxi pulled up to my small apartment in Bay Ridge, not far from my mother's pizzeria, which she had finally sold last year. I paid the driver in cash. Old habits. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my mother's voice in my head, before I took the Valerius job. I had sat with her in her small kitchen. I told her I was scared of the money, the power, the whispers. She had taken my hand. Nora, she said, her grip still strong from decades of kneading dough. If the world of the rich is a stage, you go and be the person who brings the lights. Do not you dare just be the backdrop. Tonight at the gala, I had felt like the backdrop. I had felt like a prop in Ethan's personal drama. Dancing with James had been a shield. But that cryptic text, Ethan's threat. I unlocked my door, the emerald silk dress now feeling heavy, like an obligation. The gala was not just a party, it was a test of whether I could hold on to my own identity, my own kindness, while shaking hands with that much power. And I did not know if I was passing. The hand he placed on my elbow was firm, grounding. James escorted me from the dance floor, a solid presence in the glittering, shifting crowd. We stopped near a quiet alcove, away from the main flow of guests. The orchestra was already starting a new, faster tune. "He is gone," James said, his voice that same low, calm rumble. He signaled to a passing waiter, who immediately changed direction and approached us. James took 2 glasses of champagne from the tray. He held one out to me. My hand was still not perfectly steady. "If you are scared," he said, his eyes on my face, "we can dance again." I took the glass. The crystal was cool, heavy. I looked at him. This stranger who had just built a wall around me. "I'm not scared," so I said. And I was surprised to find it was true. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, clear focus. "I just need the light to be strong enough." His expression did not change, but I thought I saw a flicker of something in his dark eyes. Interest. Before he could reply, the master of ceremonies' voice boomed from the stage, silencing the room. And now, ladies and gentlemen, a moment of true generosity. The crowd quieted. "We are overjoyed to announce an extraordinary, anonymous donation of $5 million to the new pediatric wing." A wave of appreciative applause filled the ballroom. People turned to their neighbors, whispering. I heard the name murmured from a table nearby. "Valerius, it must be Valerius. My new employer, my new mission." My mind flashed to the prospectus I had spent the last 72 hours perfecting, the kindness ledger. My plan to take donations just like this one and make them utterly transparent, tracking their impact in real time, from the bank transfer to the heartbeat monitor. This was why I was here. This was the light I was meant to bring. I took a sip of champagne. It was dry, sharp. James was watching me, but he was no longer looking at me. He was scanning the room, his gaze resting for a moment on the press balcony, then on a side exit. He was a man who measured his surroundings. I started, needing to get away, to clear my head. "Excuse me," he said at the same time. He gave a slight, formal nod. "Enjoy your evening, Nora." He had used my name. I had not told it to him. I must have registered the shock on my face, because he added, "Ethan said it." Of course. He had been listening. He had been present in a way I was not used to. He turned and was gone, absorbed by a small group of older men in tuxedos, all of whom seemed to straighten just a little as he approached. I set my barely touched glass down. I needed air. I needed a mirror. I needed to check that the girl from Bay Ridge was still under the emerald silk. I headed for the grand marble hallway that led to the powder rooms, away from the main ballroom. The hallway was quieter, the music muffled by thick carpets. I was halfway to the archway when a hand closed on my arm. "We are not finished." Ethan. He had been waiting. He spun me around, not hard enough to be a public assault, but with enough proprietary force to make my blood run cold. His smile, the one that had once made me feel safe, was beautiful and toxic. "That was quite a performance. Nora," he said, his voice low and intimate, "finding a new protector already. You move fast." "Let go of me, Ethan." I kept my voice even. "Or what you will have your new friend stop me." He laughed, and the sound skittered down my spine. "I see you are fitting right in. Valerius Holdings, big league. They must not know about your creative accounting." The air left my lungs. "What are you talking about?" "Project Nightingale," he whispered, leaning closer. The smell of his expensive, sharp cologne filled my nose, a scent I now associated with lies. I was looking at some old files. It is amazing what you find. A lost file, a few miscalculations. It would be a shame if that got to your new, very serious employers. They value transparency, do they not? This was it, the weapon, the file that had vanished. He was not just implying, he was threatening. He was telling me he owned me. "You are..." I started, but my voice was choked. "She is with me." The voice was not loud, but it cut through the hallway like a blade. James was standing 3 feet away. I had not heard him approach. He was no longer just a guest. He was a presence. His dark eyes were fixed on Ethan's hand, which was still gripping my arm. Ethan's smile faltered. He dropped his hand, a flicker of genuine surprise on his face. He clearly had not expected this. He sized James up, a quick, dismissive glance. This is a private conversation." "It appears to be over," James said. He did not move, did not raise his voice. He just stood there, an immovable object. I realized in that moment he was not a lost guest. He was not just another man in a suit. He belonged to this world, to this stage. In a way, I did not. In a way, Ethan, for all his bluster, did not. Ethan, for the first time, looked uncertain. He looked from James to me. His mask of concern slipped back into place, but this time it was laced with pure venom. He directed his final words at me. "He's not the kind of man you bring your faith to. Nora, you're in over your head." I found my voice. It was shaking, but it was mine. "Faith," I said, looking straight at Ethan, "is not something you get to define." Ethan's face tightened. He gave a short, bitter laugh, adjusted his cuffs, and stalked away, back toward the ballroom. I was left in the hallway with James. I was breathing fast. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes, thank you, again." My phone vibrated in my clutch. I pulled it out, needing the distraction. A voice memo from Marisol. I angled the phone to my ear, hitting play. Her voice was a fast, urgent whisper, the sound of street traffic behind her. "Nora, listen, I am deep in this thing. The money laundering. It is not just real estate. It is high-end art. They are washing millions through auctions. And I have a name that keeps coming up, a name that is connected to everything. The Caruso Gallery. Bianca Caruso. Be careful. Nora, this is old, ugly money." I clicked the phone off. My blood felt like slush. Bianca Caruso, the woman talking to Ethan, the woman I had seen from the dance floor. I looked up at James. He was watching me, his expression unreadable. He had protected me twice. He was calm, powerful, and utterly unknown. But Marisol's words, my mother's words, they all collided. Kindness needs teeth. Action. I chose to move toward the light. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice suddenly clear. He just waited. "I work at Valerius Holdings," I said. "My first day is Monday. I am Nora Russo. I am the new head of social impact." He just nodded. "James, the donation," I pushed on. "The one announced tonight, my job is to build a platform, the kindness ledger, to make sure that money, all of the Valerius Foundation money, has a verifiable, real-time impact. No more black boxes, just results." I watched his face. Nothing. "Ethan, my ex, he thinks he has leverage on me. He thinks I am weak. I need to prove him wrong." I took a deep breath. "I need to present my ledger to the right person. I would like to meet with you on Monday." I had no idea who he was, a donor, a trustee, a friend of the Valerius family. It did not matter. He had power. He looked at me for a long, silent moment. I felt like I was being X-rayed, every motive, every fear, laid bare. I thought he would refuse. "Send a meeting request to the executive office," he said finally. "Mark it Kindness Ledger. They will find time for you." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a card. It was not a personal card. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock. It just said Valerius Holdings, the address near Bryant Park, and a single email address, executiveoffice@valerius.com, no name. "Thank you," I said, taking the card. He nodded once. "Do not let him define your night," he said again. And then he was gone, walking toward the main ballroom with purpose. I sagged against the cool marble wall, the card clutched in my hand. My phone vibrated again. Another text, unknown number. "Every angel has an agent." My heart hammered. I pushed off the wall and walked to the grand balustrade overlooking the main ballroom. I looked down at the sea of black ties and jewels. My eyes found her. Bianca Caruso. She was standing near the terrace doors, watching the crowd, as if she felt my gaze. She slowly turned her head and looked right up at me. She did not smile. She just held my gaze. I was no longer an observer. I was in the game. I pulled back from the railing, out of her sight. I took a deep breath. An action plan was forming in my mind. Kindness, my mother's currency, but kindness had to be smart. Kindness had to be structured. Kindness, I thought, needs teeth and maybe a body camera. I looked at the blank card in my hand. I had no idea what I had just done. I had no idea that I had just, in effect, sent a meeting request to the silent, reclusive king of this entire operation. I did not know I had just thrown a switch, illuminating a line between my new life and an ancient, bloody one. Monday morning at Valerius Holdings was a different world from the Beaumont. The Beaumont was gold and velvet, a place of soft edges and old whispers. The headquarters near Bryant Park was steel, glass, and silence. The elevators moved so fast and so quietly they made my stomach drop. My new office was on the 35th floor, a glass box that looked out over the city. I did not have time to enjoy the view. My meeting, the one I had requested via the executive office, was scheduled for 10 ante-meridium. I spent the morning in a small, stark white conference room, setting up my presentation, the kindness ledger. It was not just a concept anymore. I had built a beta version, a dashboard that connected donation databases to community impact metrics, all designed to be auditable in real time. My hands were not shaking this time. This was my turf. The smell of hot coffee and the low hum of the server in the wall was my armor. At 10 ante-meridium on the dot, my direct boss, Clara Santini, walked in. She was a sharp woman, all angles and expensive-looking sheath dresses, who had seemed lukewarm about my hiring. "Nora, the board is very interested in this. Do not waste their time." "I will not," I said. A few other executives filed in, people I recognized from my interview process. Dion Park, the compliance lawyer, gave me a curt, encouraging nod from the back. Then the door opened again. My breath stopped. It was him, the man from the gala, my dancer. James. He was not in a tuxedo now. He was in a dark gray suit that was so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been constructed on him. He walked to the head of the table, and everyone in the room, Clara, the executives, they all sat up straighter. They all looked at him. Clara, her voice suddenly much warmer, said, "Good morning, Mr. Valerius." Mr. Valerius, Luca Valerius, the chief executive officer, the recluse, the cleaner, my boss. He did not look at me, not at first. He sat down, opened a sleek, impossibly thin laptop, and said to the room, "Let's begin, Miss Russo." My blood was roaring in my ears. He knew who I was at the gala, and he knew I worked for him when I asked for the dance. He knew when he shielded me from Ethan. He knew when I asked for this meeting. A wave of heat, pure, unadulterated humiliation washed over me. I had asked my new billionaire mafia boss to dance because my ex was watching. I looked at his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the utter calm. He was waiting. I had two choices. I could crumble, or I could be the head of social impact partnerships. I chose the latter. I clicked the first slide. "Good morning," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "My name is Nora Russo, and I'm here to propose that kindness, without accountability, is just marketing. We are going to build the accountability." I walked them through it for 20 minutes. I showed them the framework, the way the kindness ledger would connect every dollar donated to a verified outcome. I talked about data, about real-time reporting, about community feedback loops. Then I got to the hard part, the system's integrity, I said, looking right at the head of the table. Depends on an auditable trail. That means a new level of know your customer protocols for our nonprofit partners. It means traceability of funds from inception to impact. I paused. Luca Valerius looked up from his screen. His eyes, the same dark, steady eyes from the ballroom, met mine. There was no James in them. This was all business. "Miss Russo," he said, his voice the same low rumble, but now with an edge of steel. "Your system assumes clean entry. What about risk triangulation? How does your ledger account for a partner, a nonprofit, that is not simply inefficient but actively fraudulent? How do you prevent our platform from being used to legitimize washed money, Miraz, as you call it? He was quoting me. He was quoting my own proposal. He had read every word. And he was absolutely right. I did not flinch. That is slide 8, Mr. Valerius. I clicked. The system flags inconsistencies. It cross-references partner spending with industry standards, with community reports, with their own tax filings. If a foundation claims to be feeding 500 people a day, but their food budget is only $50, the ledger flags it. If a community center claims to be open, but our real-time feedback loop shows it is closed, the ledger flags it. It does not just measure good, it finds the gaps. It finds the red flags. I showed him the dashboard. I showed him the data. The room was silent. I could hear Dion's pen scratching on a legal pad. Luca Valerius stared at the screen for a full minute. He did not look at me. He looked at the data. Who built this beta? I did, I said, over the weekend. He looked at me. A long, assessing, unreadable look. It was more terrifying than Ethan's anger. You will need a full team, he said. Clara, get her whatever she needs. I want a full-scale test, using last quarter's data, by the end of the week. He stood up. Good, thank you, Miss Russo. He was gone. Just like that, the meeting was over. As I was packing my laptop, my hands finally starting to shake, Dion Park stopped by my desk. He was not smiling. That was impressive, Juanita, he said, which from Dion was high praise. You poked the bear and the bear liked it. It felt like he was trying to tear it apart, I said. He was, Dion said. He was testing the locks. You held up. He leaned against my partition. But now you are on his radar, which means you are on everyone's radar. Be careful, Nora. Careful of what? Valerius Holdings is clean. Legally, he said, emphasizing the word. But the family name, it attracts sharks. I got a ping this morning. An outside consultant named Armand is doing a review of all new executive hires, including you. Armand? He is Bianca Caruso's personal lawyer, Dion said. They call him her shadow. He's the one who makes things, and people disappear legally. If you have any skeletons, any Project Nightingale from your past, he will find it, and he will use it. A chill ran through me. Bianca Caruso, the woman with Ethan. That night, Marisol called me, her voice frantic. Nora, I have it. I have the money trail. It is just like I said. The Caruso Gallery. They buy art at inflated prices from a shell foundation, which then donates a fraction of the money to a community fund, and it all gets written off. And guess who sits on the board of that shell foundation? Who? A man named Walter Crane, she said. He's an old school trustee, a professional philanthropist. He's on the board of like 20 different charities, including what? Including 2 that are major partners with the Valerius Foundation. My blood ran cold. The next day, I saw Clara, my boss, walking out of a bar near the office, a classic, dark wood steakhouse, and laughing with her, his hand on her arm in that easy, proprietary way, was Ethan Ward. They looked very, very comfortable. My internal radar, the one I had built in Bay Ridge, was not just pinging, it was screaming. Then, 2 days later, the invitation came. A heavy, cream cardstock, just like the one Luca Valerius had given me. An invitation for coffee from Bianca Caruso. We met at a private club in the Upper East Side. She was smaller in person, elegant, her silver hair perfect. She smelled like old money and expensive perfume. Nora, she said, smiling, her eyes not smiling at all. I'm so glad we could do this. I heard about your presentation. So bright. It is a functional tool, I said, sipping water. Of course, she laughed, a sound like tiny bells. But transparency, my dear, is an art, not a science, and sometimes, in the rush to be so open, we create bottlenecks. We slow down the good work. I see it as quality control, I said. Of course, she leaned in. Listen, the holiday season is coming. It is the biggest giving season of the year. I have some friendly donors, very generous. They want to contribute to the Valerius funds, but they are private. They do not like the new Know Your Customer rules. They feel they are invasive. Our compliance is not optional, I said. I am not talking about optional, she said smoothly. I'm talking about an expedited path for friends, for the greater good. Add their contributions. We can skip a few of the more tedious steps just for the holidays to get the money moving. What do you say? She was asking me to compromise my ledger, to punch a hole in the very foundation of my job. I smiled, a polite, professional smile. Miss Caruso, I appreciate the offer, but from a compliance standpoint, a friendly donor and a high-risk donor are treated with the same level of due diligence. The process is the process. It is what protects the foundation, and it is what protects our partners. Bianca Caruso's smile did not waver, but her eyes went cold. A pity, she said. You're more like them than I thought. That night, I worked late, running the beta test Luca had requested. I was in the parking garage, a dark, concrete cavern that smelled like oil and exhaust, when Ethan stepped out from behind a pillar. My heart leaped into my throat. You are a hard woman to find, Nora, he said, blocking my path to the elevator. Get out of my way, Ethan. You embarrassed me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. He advanced, backing me up against a concrete support pillar. You and your new boss. You think you are safe. You think he can protect you from me. He slammed his hand against the pillar, next to my head. Ethan, back off. He leaned in, his face inches from mine, the smell of his cologne making me sick. You are in over your head. You should have taken my help. Now, you are just stupid. I was terrified, but I was also, suddenly, furious. I thought of my mother. I thought of Luca's test. I thought of Bianca's condescending smile. I am wearing a body camera, Ethan, I said, my voice as cold and dead as the concrete at my back. It is a new Valerius security policy for executives walking to their cars. It is recording audio and video, and it is streaming to a live server. So either you move, or you explain to a judge why you are assaulting me. It was a total bluff. Ethan froze. He stared at me, searching my face. He could not tell if I was lying. He saw the coldness in my eyes, the absolute lack of fear I was projecting. He slowly, very slowly lowered his hand. He took a step back. You are lying. Am I? I said, try me. He stared at me for another second, then swore, a vicious sound that echoed in the empty garage. He turned and walked away. I stayed pressed against the pillar until my legs stopped shaking. I went back up to my office, my hands trembling so hard I could barely use my key card. I sat in my glass box, the city lights glittering below me. I ran the beta test. I loaded all of last quarter's data, and there it was. 2 red lights started blinking on my dashboard, 2 major flags. One was a series of donations from the Walter Crane Foundation. The numbers were perfect. Too perfect. The community impact receipts were all identical. Digital copies. Fakes. The other was a purchase. A lot of art. Bought by the Valerius Foundation for a children's hospital art program. Bought from the Caruso Gallery. The price was inflated by at least 400%. I stared at the screen. I finally had it. The connection. The proof. My phone rang. It was late, almost 11 post-meridium. The caller ID was blocked. I picked it up. Nora Russo. If you are planning to poke that nest, make sure your light has a place to stand. It was Luca Valerius. His voice was husky, tired, and unmistakable. He did not say goodbye. He just hung up. I looked at the red lights on my screen. He knew what I would find. He was not just testing my program. He was testing me. I opened my email. I created a new meeting, an internal briefing on the new Kindness Ledger audit protocols. I invited Dion Park. I invited Clara Santini. And then I added one more name to the invite list, Ethan Ward. The trap was set. The night before the presentation, Our server was attacked. A brute force. Sophisticated attempt to wipe the staging data for the ledger. I got the alert at 2 a.m, a screaming alarm on my phone. I watched the logs for a few minutes. My heart pounding a familiar, sick rhythm. They were trying to erase the red flags. They were trying to erase my work. But there is a reason Ethan's gaslighting was so effective on me. I am, by nature, untrusting. I had been betrayed by data before, a small-scale sabotage at my old agency that Ethan had probably orchestrated. So I had a habit. I had a cold mirror, an offline, air-gapped, encrypted hard drive containing a complete, time-stamped snapshot of the entire beta database, taken right after I found the red flags. They were attacking a decoy. I went back to sleep. The next morning, I walked into the 40th floor conference room, the one reserved for the board. It was all glass and cold, dark wood. Dion Park was there, his face set like stone, a stack of folders by his side. Clara Santini was at the head of the table, looking nervous, avoiding my eyes. And Ethan Ward was there. He was not an employee, but he was sitting next to Clara, a guest consultant. He looked confident, relaxed, his handsome face set in an expression of polite interest. He was here to watch me fail, to make sure the server glitch had done its job. He smiled at me. A brilliant, false smile. I smiled back. I set up 2 projectors. "Good morning," I said, my voice crisp in the quiet room. "As you know, we have been testing the beta version of the Kindness Ledger. Last night, our server for the project was attacked." Clara gasped. Ethan's face showed the perfect amount of professional concern. "The data was corrupted," I continued, "which is why today we will be working from a cold mirror." Ethan's smile did not falter, but his eyes went still. "On the left," I said, clicking the remote, "you will see the corrupted live data. A mess, as you can see. On the right, this is the offline mirror I secured 72 hours ago before the attack." A new screen lit up. My dashboard, clean, functional, and active. We will be comparing the mirror's integrity against last quarter's finalized reports. For 20 minutes, I showed them the matches, line by line, dollar by dollar, the literacy programs, the community grants, the food bank logistics. Everything matched. It was a perfect, clean system. "As you can see," I said, "the system works. Every donation from last quarter is accounted for, clean and verified, except for 2. I clicked. The screen refreshed. 2 large, blinking red boxes appeared. One was the Walter Crane Foundation. The other was the Caruso Gallery art purchase. Ethan's frown was barely a flicker, a contraction of the muscles between his eyebrows that lasted maybe half a second, but I saw it. He had not expected this. He had expected a blank screen. A failed project. "These 2 partners," I said, "show significant discrepancies. Funds not matching impact receipts. Inflated invoices." "That is a serious allegation, Nora," Clara said, her voice sharp. "Walter Crane is one of the most respected men in this city." "It is not an allegation," I said, turning to her. "It is an audit flag, which brings me to the next phase, the audit protocol." I looked at Ethan. "This is where your expertise as a risk consultant will be invaluable. Ethan, let's walk through the Know Your Customer verification process." I put up a slide with a complex flowchart. When a high-value partner is flagged, like this, the system requires secondary verification. My question is, at what point do we verify the tax identification number? Is it at the point of initial flag, as per protocol, A, or after the secondary outreach, as per protocol, B? It was a trick question, a boring, procedural, technical trap. Ethan leaned forward, his voice smooth and condescending. "Nora, that is a classic rookie mistake. You never wait for secondary outreach. The moment it is flagged, you run the tax ID. You have to. It is the only way to manage the timeline." He was wrong. He was so wrong. The standard legal protocol was B. You reached out first to avoid illegal database cross-contamination. Only a criminal, someone trying to create a false trail, would use protocol A. "That is interesting," I said. And what about the fund source report? Do you file it before or after the asset is logged in our system? Before, obviously, Ethan said with a small, arrogant laugh. To anyone who has actually done this, you file before. It creates the paper trail. Another trap, another failure. The legal requirement was to file after logging to prevent preemptive falsification. And my final question, I said, for a high-risk art purchase, like the Caruso one, how do you verify the appraisal? Do you use the gallery's appraisal or an independent one? Ethan sighed, as if explaining something very simple to a child. You use the galleries. It is the source document. It is cleaner. You use an independent one only if you find a problem. You are just creating work. Nora. The room was silent. Dion Park was looking down, writing. Thank you, Ethan, I said, my voice quiet. That was very helpful. I looked at Dion. He did not look up. Ethan, I said, you are wrong on all three. The legal protocol is B. You file the fund source report after logging, and you are legally required to use a third party, independent appraisal on any art purchase over $100,000. Ethan's face went white. You only know those answers, I said. The ones you gave. If you're the person who is actively falsifying the documents, you are not describing the protocol. You are describing your method. Clara stood up. Nora, this is outrageous. You are accusing... But, ma'am? Please sit down, Clara, Dion said, his voice soft. He looked up. He clicked a button on his own laptop. The main screen changed. It was a screenshot of an email. This is an email, Dion said to the room. From Ethan Ward to Walter Crane. It was deleted 1 hour ago from Mr. Ward's server, our cyber team, who have been monitoring him since he threatened Miss Russo at the gala, recovered it. The email was short. It read, she is presenting today. The server attack failed. She has nothing but the mirror. Stick to the story. We used the gallery appraisal. We filed the tax ID at the flag. We logged the source report before asset receipt. They cannot prove a thing. It is clean. The air was sucked from the room. Ethan Ward looked at the screen, then at me. His face was no longer handsome. It was just ugly. The main door of the conference room opened. Luca Valerius stepped in. He was not James. He was not the man from the gala. He was not the quiet, assessing chief executive officer. This was someone else. This was a man who owned the room, the building, the air. His eyes were cold fire. He did not look at me. He looked at Ethan. Dion, Luca said, his voice a low command. Yes, Mr. Valerius. Activate Protocol 7. Full internal audit. Seize all relevant devices. Mr. Ward's consultant contract is terminated, effective immediately. He will be escorted from the building by security and handed over to the federal agents who are waiting in the lobby. Federal agents. He had feds waiting in the lobby. Clara made a small, strangled noise. Mr. Crane, Luca said, looking at the small video screen at the end of the table. Walter Crane was on a video call. The old, respected philanthropist had his face in his hands. It was just a slumped, gray suit. The art crate from the Caruso Gallery, Luca continued. Impound it. Send it to our independent appraisers in Delaware. Miss Russo, you will coordinate. Yes, Mr. Valerius, I said. Security guards, men in dark suits who had not been there a moment before, entered the room. They walked to Ethan. Mr. Ward, please come with us. Ethan stood up. He looked at me, his eyes full of a hatred so pure it was almost a tangible thing. You, he whispered, you stupid. Get him out, Luca ordered. As Ethan was being led out, the door opened again. Bianca Caruso walked in. She was smiling, holding a small leather portfolio. She looked like she was arriving for a pleasant morning chat. She took in the scene, the security guards, Ethan's white face, Clara's tears, my steady gaze. Her smile did not falter. Luca, darling, she said, her voice like chimes. What a busy morning. I just came to drop off the donation list for the holiday drive. Luca just looked at her. He did not speak. She turned her gaze to me. She walked over, as if to hand me the portfolio. She stopped, very close. "Transparency," she said, her voice a low, pleasant murmur just for me. "It is such a lovely story." I did not move. I did not blink. "And truth," I said, my voice just as low, "is a timestamp." Her smile tightened. It was the first real emotion I had seen from her. She laughed, a brittle sound, and walked out of the room. It was over. The room emptied. Dion gave me a single sharp nod and left with his folders. I was alone, packing my laptop. I walked out into the empty hallway. My legs were shaking. I had won. I had used data and process and a bluff, and I had won. A side door opened. Bianca Caruso stepped out. "Kindness," she said, her voice no longer pleasant. It was cold. "It is a weakness, little girl, a lovely, stupid weakness." "It got the job done," I said. She stepped closer. "You did not get anything done. You just moved the pieces, but you cannot change the board." She tilted her head. "You, with your Bay Ridge manners and your bought and paid for dress, you do not belong here. Russo, a good, simple name, but it is not your name, is it?" The floor tilted. "What did you say?" "I am old. Nora, I remember the names. I remember the faces. Kindness cannot protect you from bloodlines, and you have a very, very complicated one." She smiled, a true, cold smile, and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble. I went to the nearest restroom. I leaned on the cool marble counter, staring at my own face in the mirror. My face? Nora Russo. But not Russo. I called my mother. She picked up on the third ring, the sound of the pizzeria, the old one, in the background noise of her kitchen. "Mom," I said, my voice sounding strange. "Who is Russo?" There was a long silence on the other end, a silence so heavy it felt like a stone. "Mama, it is your stepfather's name, Nora," she said, her voice very small. Your first father, your biological father, he disappeared." "Disappeared? What are you talking about?" "It was a long time ago, before you were born. Really, he was a man who did favors. For people, he was a liaison. For the Valerius family, the old generation." My blood turned to ice. What happened to him?" "He got caught in the middle," she whispered, and I could hear her crying. "There was a dispute, an argument. They said he crossed a line. He vanished. Nora, I took the Russo name. I moved to Bay Ridge. I wanted you to be safe. I wanted you to be kind." I hung up the phone. My hands were numb. I went home. I did not go to my apartment. I went to my mother's house. She was waiting for me. She had an old wooden box, a cigar box, on the kitchen table. "I kept this for you," she said, "from him." I opened it. Inside, there was a small, tarnished silver medal on a chain, St. Christopher, the patron saint of travelers. And underneath it, a photograph, faded, creased. It was from a newspaper clipping, a grainy black and white image of a street, a gunfight, a man. My father, I assumed, was pulling a small child out of the line of fire, shielding him with his own body. I looked closer. The child, he was small, dark-haired, his face turned toward the camera, his eyes, and they were his eyes. They were the eyes of the man who called himself James. They were the dark, steady, unreadable eyes of Luca Valerius. I went into my mother's small bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror, the face of Nora Russo, a name that was not mine, the employee of Luca Valerius, the man my father had saved or died for. I whispered to the girl in the mirror, "Kindness has teeth." I took a deep, shuddering breath. And tonight it bit. The silence that followed the explosion was almost worse. The media, catching the scent of blood in the philanthropic waters, descended. But they did not find the story they wanted, not at first. Marisol, my Marisol, moved faster. She dropped a special episode of her podcast, bypassing all the mafia gossip traps. She titled it, Kindness is Evidence. She did not focus on Bianca or the shadows. She focused on the victims. She interviewed the parents whose children were denied treatment because of Walter Crane's misallocated hospital funds. She spoke to the artists whose careers were ruined by the Caruso Gallery's price fixing. She made the abstract numbers on my ledger bleed. It was a masterpiece of righteous, journalistic anger. The official world reacted, the district attorney's office, bolstered by Marisol's reporting and the federal agent's case, formally opened an investigation into Bianca Caruso's network. Walter Crane, faced with a lifetime in prison, began to talk. He gave them everything. He named Bianca as the sole director of the money flow. He detailed a complex network that stretched far beyond New York, hinting at Eastern European partners who were now, with this public exposure, becoming very unhappy rivals. At Valerius Holdings, the fallout was swift and cold. Clara Santini was suspended, pending a full internal investigation into her conflicts of interest. Her office was dark, her name already removed from the internal directory, and I was summoned, not to a conference room, but to the 40th floor, to his office. Luca Valerius was not sitting behind his massive desk. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at Bryant Park. He did not turn when I entered. "Miss Russo," he said. His voice was tired. "Your ledger works. It found the rot. Now, I want you to use it to clean the rest of the house." "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice steady. "It means you are no longer just head of social impact partnerships. That is a title. I am giving you a task. You will oversee the implementation of the Kindness Ledger protocol across the entire Valerius Foundation ecosystem. All partners, all accounts, no exceptions. You will report directly to me." It was not a request. It was a deployment. "I accept," I said, "but we need to talk first." He turned. Finally, his dark eyes were shadowed. "We are talking." "No," I said. I walked forward, stopping at the edge of the massive, empty desk that sat between us. "We are not. I need to know what I am walking into. I need to know what you know." I reached into my bag. I pulled out the small, tarnished silver charm, the St. Christopher. I placed it on the polished wood. My mother gave this to me. It belonged to my biological father. Luca's eyes fixed on the charm, his expression, always so controlled, seemed to tighten, to freeze. His name was Antonio. He was a liaison for your family, the old generation. Luca said nothing. He just watched me. "And then," I said, my voice dropping, "he saved a child during a dispute. He pulled him out of the line of fire." I pulled out the second item, the faded, folded newspaper clipping. I unfolded it and placed it on the desk next to the charm. The grainy image of my father, the small, dark-haired boy, Luca's eyes. He disappeared after this. I said, "My mother told me he crossed a line. Bianca Caruso told me kindness cannot protect you from bloodlines." I looked him right in the eye. She was wrong. Was she not? Kindness did protect a bloodline. Yours. He looked at the photo for a long, silent minute. I could hear the faint, high-pitched hum of the building's ventilation system. He was not breathing. He finally raised his head. The man I saw was not James. He was not the chief executive officer. He was the small boy in the photo, grown up. His gaze was raw, unguarded. "I remember," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The noise, the glass. I remember." His hand, pushing my head down, he looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. I never knew his name. I never knew what happened to him. "He vanished," I said, the word tasting like ash. "My mother said the line does not spare children. She was wrong. It spared you." "It spared me." He agreed. He looked at the photo, then at the charm. "Your father, Antonio. He did not just cross a line. He broke the code, the old code, to save me." My father, He paused. My father was grateful. My grandfather was not. My grandfather believed that kindness, as you call it, was a liability. He made your father disappear. There it was. The truth. Not an allegation, just a fact, laid bare on a billionaire's desk. That is the legacy you are trying to clean. I said, it was not an accusation, it was a statement. That is the legacy I am trying to end, he corrected, his voice gaining its steel back. With data, with law, with this. He tapped a finger on the desk, near my ledger's framework, which I realized he had printed out. My grandfather used blood. Bianca uses loopholes. I am using transparency. It is the only way. She said kindness buys time, but blood buys silence. I said, remembering the cold of the hallway. Blood buys corpses, Lucas said, his voice hard. And silence is just what people hear before the next gunshot. I am not interested in either. I am interested in this. He looked at me. The job I just gave you. It is not a reward. It is a target. You have painted one on your back. Bianca is gone. For now. She has vanished. Her lawyer, Armand, was disbarred this morning for evidence tampering. The gallery network is in chaos, but the rot is deep. The Eastern European partners Crane mentioned. They do not play by Bianca's polite rules. They are animals, and you just kick their nest. So the light needs a place to stand, I said, echoing his words from that night. It needs a fortress, he said. This is my commitment. I will not hide the past. I will not deny the gray. But I will give you every single resource, every legal shield, every ounce of power I have to make sure this light you have built becomes an inferno. No more shadows. That is the only way I can repay the debt. To him. He nodded at the photo. That is a professional boundary, I said. And the personal one, he said, walking around the desk, is that you are the daughter of the man who saved my life, and I am the chief executive officer of this company, and you are my employee. It is the most complicated, impossible conflict of interest I have ever seen. He was standing in front of me now, close. Not like the gala, not like a shield. He smelled like cedarwood and coffee. So here are the boundaries, he said, his voice low. In this building, you are Miss Russo. You are the most protected and the most vital asset I have. I will be your boss, and I will be difficult outside this building. We will have to figure that out. He looked at the charm, then back at me. He did not touch me. Take your father's things, Nora, and get to work. The work was brutal. I spent the next 2 weeks in a data-driven hell, integrating the ledger. But as the system grew, as the light spread, something in me settled. I received a letter, not an email, a letter forwarded from the Valerius legal department. It was from Ethan's lawyer. It was a single sentence. Mr. Ward maintains he was only playing by the rules of the game. I was in my office, looking at the city. I picked up my pen, signed a press release that Dion had drafted about our new, industry-leading transparency standards, and said to the empty room, the rules have changed. That weekend, I went back to Bay Ridge, but I was not hiding. I used my new absurd salary to rent the old pizzeria for a night. My mother helped me. We filled it with the smell of oregano and garlic. We put up signs in the window, community night, free pizza. And they came. The whole neighborhood. Kids, old men, young families. I stood on a chair, the same way I used to reach the cheese. I announced the Christopher's Promise Scholarship. I held up the silver charm. This belonged to a man from Bay Ridge, I said, my voice thick. He was a traveler, and this scholarship is for the travelers, for the kids from this neighborhood who want to see the world and then come back and build a better one. I had the logo designed, a silver dove, its wings spread, based on the shape of the metal. For the first time in weeks, I did not feel like I was wearing armor. I was just Nora. It was late. The families were gone. My mother was in the back, cleaning up. I was wiping down the last table when the bell on the door chimed. Luca Valerius walked in. He was not in a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a simple, dark sweater. He looked impossibly out of place, and yet completely at ease. He was holding a white pastry box tied with string. "I was told," he said, his voice low in the quiet shop, "that this was the correct protocol." He placed the box on the counter. Cannoli, the real kind, from the bakery on the next block. "You came a long way for pastry," I said, my heart doing a strange, slow beat. "I was in the neighborhood," he said. He looked around the small, warm pizzeria. "This is where you are from." "This is it. It smells good," he said. "It smells like, home." We stood in silence for a moment. My mother stuck her head out from the kitchen, saw him, saw the cannoli, and gave me a look I could not decipher. Then she smiled, a small, knowing smile, and vanished back into the kitchen. "There is a backyard," and I said, "if you want to eat these." We sat on the old, rickety bench behind the pizzeria. The air was cool, smelling of the city and the garlic from the ovens. We ate the cannoli, the crisp shell and sweet ricotta. "Thank you," he said. "For what, the scholarship?" "For that," he said. "And for this, for not just seeing the monster." "I'm still getting to know the man," I said. A faint strain of music, a radio from an open apartment window nearby, drifted down. A slow, old song, a foxtrot. I laughed, a small, real laugh. He stood up. He did not say a word. He just held out his hand, palm up, the same way he had at the gala. This time, my hand was not shaking. I placed it in his... He drew me up, his other hand finding my waist, and we danced, slowly. On the cracked concrete of a pizzeria backyard in Bay Ridge, there were no chandeliers, no paparazzi, no ex-boyfriends. No one was watching. There was no pretense. It was not, I knew, a permanent piece. The postcard that had arrived at my office that week, with no return address, proved that. It was a picture of an old, dark cathedral. On the back, one line in sharp, block letters. "Kindness buys time. Blood buys silence." Bianca or her friends were still out there. The shadows were still long. But as I moved with Luca, his hand warm on my back, I felt it. We had not banished the darkness, but we had built a structure. We had built a light, with data and process and cannoli and courage. We had built a place to stand. The next year was not a year of peace. It was a year of construction, the kindness ledger. My small beta test became a fire. It became the new standard for Valerius Holdings. And then, slowly, it began to change the industry. Other foundations, stung by the public fallout from the Crane scandal, started calling, wanting to license the system. Transparency, it turned out, was very good for business when the alternative was federal prison. Luca was true to his word. He announced at a press conference, with me standing beside him, that Valerius Holdings was committing 1% of its total equity, not just its profits, to an independently governed community fund. The fund would be managed in its entirety, using the kindness ledger. It was a move that shocked the financial world and made our stock climb 9 points. The ripples spread. Marisol's podcast, Kindness is Evidence, won a major journalism award. She accepted it, live streaming from her messy apartment, and dedicated it to the victims of polite theft. She was a star now, but she still lived on bad coffee and righteous fury. Dion Park, with a quiet grant from the New Independent Fund, started a pro bono legal clinic. He did not do it in Midtown. He opened it in a small storefront in the Bronx, specializing in helping victims of charitable fraud and nonprofit scams. He was, I gathered, terrifyingly effective. And in Bay Ridge, on the same block as the old pizzeria, ground was broken for the new Christopher's Promise Children's Library. My mother was on the board. She was in charge of the storytelling hour. My title changed. I was no longer a head of... I wrote my own job description. I proposed it to Luca in a tense 2-hour meeting where he tore apart every line. I defended every line. I was promoted to Chief Impact Officer, a new C-suite position. I reported, as he had promised, directly to the chief executive officer. Our meetings were professional. They were precise. And they were charged with an undercurrent of everything unsaid, of the photograph I kept locked in my desk, of the debt he felt he owed my father. A year passed, and then it was gala season again. I stood on the same terrace at the Beaumont Hotel. The same chandeliers were pouring the same liquid gold onto a new crowd of rich faces. I was not in Saved for Silk. I was in a custom-made dark blue velvet gown that felt like armor and a whisper at the same time. I was not shaking. I was not looking for an escape. I was here as a keynote speaker. I finished my speech, a short, sharp piece on the algebra of accountability. I walked off the stage to a wave of solid, respectful applause. I felt him before I saw him. The crowd parted, just a little, the way it always did around him. Luca Valerius. He had been standing at the back of the ballroom, watching. He walked toward me. He was in a tuxedo, the same as that first night. But he was not a stranger. He was not James. He was my boss. He was my partner in this strange, bright war. He was the boy my father had saved. He stopped in front of me. He looked at me, his dark eyes holding mine, and for a second, the entire noisy, glittering ballroom just faded. "Nora," he said. His voice was low, for me alone. "They are playing our song." I listened. The orchestra, with that same perfect, terrible timing, was striking up a slow, classic foxtrot. He held out his hand, palm up. An invitation. I smiled, a real smile, one that reached my eyes. I placed my hand in his. He led me onto the floor. He drew me in, his hand finding the small of my back, a familiar, solid warmth. We began to move. "It is different this time," he murmured, his breath stirring my hair. "It is," I agreed. I leaned in, my lips brushing the shell of his ear, and I whispered the words back to him, the words that had started it all. "Could you dance with me?" He tensed, just a fraction. I pulled back just enough to see his face. "Not," I continued, my voice just for him, "because my ex is watching, but because I am." I was watching him, and I wanted to. His gaze softened, the control, the iron that he held in every meeting, it just dissolved. The corner of his mouth tilted in a small, rare, devastating smile. "In that case, Miss Russo, I thought you would never ask." We did not talk, we just danced. We did not need to. I had a secret, a kind one. The newspaper clipping, the one my mother had given me, was old, creased, and faded. I had sent it to a specialist, a digital restorer, telling them I just wanted to see the faces more clearly. When I got the file back, I opened it. The restoration was a miracle. The grainy dots were gone. The man, my father, Antonio, his face was clear. He was young, terrified, and determined. And the child he was shielding. His face turned to the camera. It was not just a pair of eyes. It was him, unmistakably. The same stubborn chin, the same line of his brow, the same intense, old soul gaze. It was Luca, a small, 5-year-old Luca, saved from a spray of bullets by the man I would never know. That single red thread of kindness, it had tied our two families together, a generation before we ever met, a debt of blood, repaid with a life that was now intertwined with mine. I had not told him. I did not know how. How do you tell a man like Luca Valerius that his entire, guarded, controlled life was a gift from your ghost? So I kept it. The restored photo was on my phone, but the charm, the little silver St. Christopher, I had it framed. It hung in my office, just a small silver disc against a cream background. It was not a religious icon. It was a reminder, a piece of my father, a piece of our story, a kind, quiet secret, waiting for the right day to be told. The work continued. The world did not stop being dark just because we had built a light. I got an email routed through our most secure, encrypted server. It was from an anonymous address, no name, no subject. The body of the email contained one sentence: "The brighter the light, the sharper the shadow." The old Nora would have panicked. The old Nora would have seen it as a threat. I looked at it. I saw it for what it was: a warning, a fact. Bianca's friends, the Eastern European animals, they were still out there. I did not delete it. I forwarded it to Dion. Then I opened my kindness ledger dashboard. I looked at the architecture, and I added a new layer of verification audits, a new firewall, a new set of teeth. I smiled. "Try me," I whispered to the empty office. That night, I did not stay late. I packed my bag. I looked at the framed charm on my wall, the silver dove of my scholarship fund on my desk, and the glittering, beautiful, complicated city outside my window. I pulled out my phone. I did not call a car. I called my mother. "Hey, Mama." "Nora, you are working too late." "I am on my way home. Actually, I will be home on Sunday." "Good," she said, her voice warm, the sound of oregano and safety. "You bring the wine. I will make the dough." "It is a date," I said. I hung up. I stood for a moment, letting the peace of that simple promise settle over me. Family. It was not just the blood in your veins. It was not the name you carried. It was the people who held on to you, the people who kept you kind. I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking on the polished marble floor of the Valerius building, my building. I thought about that night, a year ago. I thought about the fear. I thought about Ethan and Bianca and the girl in the emerald dress. She was still in me. But she was not scared anymore. She was not a backdrop. She was the light. Kindness, I thought, has teeth. It knows exactly when to bite, but it chooses, most of the time, to hug. The elevator doors opened. I looked at my reflection in the polished steel. The ballroom was still out there. The dance was still waiting. But tonight, I was leading. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so glad to have shared it with you. I would love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect. And please share your thoughts on Nora and Luca's journey. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button. It helps so much, and it means this story can be heard by so many more people. Thank you.